Alright, hello everyone. Okay, so first, let me know if you can see me and you can hear me okay. A lot of times there's some kind of technical issue with these live streams, but today went unusually smoothly. I mean, not a single hitch, you know, went wrong. So I'm kind of paranoid now that there's something wrong with this live stream. So just let me know, and let me get to my channel so that I can read your guys' comments. Now, today's live stream is going to be... Oh, let's add on my own live stream. I know. So today's tea time, which actually, oddly enough, I'm not going to be drinking tea today. But today's live stream is about the SS United States and my thoughts on it. So it's not going to be about the history of the SS United States. It's not going to be about, I don't know, anything else. It's just my thoughts on it, my perspective on what's going on with the ship right now, and all of that. And I've actually written down some notes so I can get to some major talking points. There's like 5 different talking points that I want to get to today. First and foremost, a quick explanation. So I usually have a video of Cunard ships playing, but because this particular Tea Time episode is about the SS United States, I just put the video that I published the other day up in the corner, and it's playing on loop. If you guys find it annoying after a while that it's just on loop over and over again, I can switch it back to the Cunard ships. But I just thought that, SS United States, it kind of fit. As well as the fact that, as I mentioned, I'm not actually going to be drinking any tea today. And the reason why is because, so I live up in Portland, Oregon, and, not in the city, but right outside the city. But we've had such cold weather lately that today the temperature is 58 degrees Fahrenheit. And all of a sudden, that feels really warm to me. So to me, it feels like it's 78 degrees Fahrenheit. It feels like a warm summer day in comparison to the weather we've usually been having. So I actually don't feel like drinking hot tea or anything like that because it's so warm today. And it's only 58 degrees Fahrenheit, which is not warm at all. So I just thought that was funny because today, before I started the live stream, I thought, wow, it's almost 80 degrees. How can it be, that hot? And I checked the weather, and it's only 58. So, yeah, that's that's crazy. So yeah, no tea today, no food or anything like that. I do have everything set up, and that's only because I have nowhere else to put this. And I kind of like having a table here so I can set down my phone. I have my notes, anything else I need, I have a little table here. So, yeah. And then as I get to each talking point about the SS United States, I will try to get to some of your questions and things and answer them as I go along. But also keep in mind that we have a few things. So, all right, everybody says they can hear me, see me just fine. Getting Pickle says, will SS United States really sink? Yes, they will be sinking it. Let's see. Okay, so while I know you guys have all these questions about SS United States, let me tell you what the talking points today are. The first talking point: why the Queen Mary was saved, but not the SS United States. The next talking point is about the asbestos removal, which was the final nail in the coffin for SS United States. Problems with the ship being an empty shell. The next talking point is about the Conservancy and the fact that they had a lot to contend with. And then the last talking point is about Okaloosa County and what would happen technically if the ship were to be saved at the last minute. So those are the talking points today, and then after that, if you guys have any questions or anything, I'll try to get to all of that. So anyway, the first talking point: why the Queen Mary was saved, but not the SS United States. Now, I hear a lot of people, rightly they are upset that the SS United States is sinking. They wish the ship could be saved and kept and preserved. And they look at the Queen Mary, they go, why did the United States of America save a British ship, but not their own flagship, SS United States? And first and foremost, I want to tell everybody, don't think of it that way. It wasn't America that saved the Queen Mary. Believe me, the rest of this country had nothing to do with the Queen Mary. They didn't save it in any way. It was one city, the city of Long Beach, and at the time, in the late 1960s, they were looking to build a brick and mortar museum. They wanted to have like a maritime museum because at the time, their city was pretty big in the sense that it was a lot of suburbs. They had a good bustling downtown and a beachside atmosphere. But they really wanted to grow their local economy in a way that could compare with other places like Anaheim, which had Disneyland, and they had LA, which was quickly growing into a tourist hotspot. And Long Beach was like, we want a cut of that. And so they wanted to build a brick and mortar a maritime museum. And then there came a joke, and this is written about, it's a joke, but it came about in, it's written and documented in the book RMS Queen Mary, Queen of the Queens by William J. Duncan. The very first chapter is about how there was two men who, let's see if I can remember, Lloyd D. Hart, and there's another man here by the name of Frank Cassidy. And one of them, I don't want to have to read through all of this just to get it right, but one of them made the joke about, what if someone just saved the Queen Mary and brought it to Long Beach? And it was meant to be kind of a joke, and they thought, well, why don't we, because they knew some people in the city, and a man named, I believe his name is Bud Ridings, Ridings. He was in the city of Long Beach, I forget what city manager, I think, something like that. I can't remember exactly. But basically they said to him, you guys want to build this maritime museum, why don't you just purchase the Queen Mary? Thinking that he would find it pretty funny because it sounds like such an out-of-this-world kind of idea that probably wouldn't have worked. But the funny thing was, when Ridings had really thought about it, it sounded very interesting. The idea that instead of paying all this money to build this brick and mortar building, they could just buy the Queen Mary, which the cost of what the Queen Mary was being sold for was much less than what it would have cost to build the brick and mortar museum. Because the Queen Mary was going for a little over $3 million at the time, and they thought, it'll cost us around $8 million to build this giant museum that we want to build, so it would actually be cheaper just to buy the Queen Mary, because it's already, one building, one piece. And so they put up the largest sum. There was very few people interested in buying the Queen Mary, not because there was no love for the ship, but because the idea of having to take care of a ship that would be nothing but maintenance issues for the rest of its life, and where they would keep it, and waterfront property is at a premium even in 1967, and wherever you put it, someone would have to pay to keep it there. And so there was this whole issue of, there's only a few organizations, companies, and a couple of cities that were interested in purchasing the Queen Mary. Long Beach put up the largest sum, $3.45 million for the Queen Mary. They won because they were the only people that said, well, we want to preserve this ship as an ocean liner, and a museum, but not as anything else. There were some other crazy ideas that other people had for what they would do with the Queen Mary, and so they won the bid for the Queen Mary, and the Queen Mary was brought to Long Beach. Now here's the important part about what separates Queen Mary from SS United States. First of all, SS United States didn't go on sale for auction until 1969, 2 years after Queen Mary. Now, like I said, at the time, the Queen Mary was the first of those ocean liners to go up for auction. Well, I'm not the first, but what I mean is, in terms of a massive ocean liner, Queen Mary came before the SS United States when it went up for auction, 1967. That's when the joke happened between Bud Ridings, Cassidy, and Hart, and Ridings said, you know what, let's do this, let's buy the Queen Mary. If the SS United States had gone up for auction first, I am so certain, I'm 98.9% certain, they would have purchased the SS United States instead of the Queen Mary if United States had gone up for auction before the Queen Mary. I think they would have done it because it represented the United States and it fits perfectly. But the Queen Mary went up for auction first, and it's not like the Queen Mary didn't do anything for this country. The Queen Mary did transport over 500,000 of our troops, our American troops, during World War II. Not only that, but the Queen Mary also did help to shorten the war by a year, as credited by Winston Churchill, and that was beneficial to us because that was a year less of sending our troops to their death, as well as the fact that for most of the Queen Mary's life on the ocean, her majority of passengers were all American. And in fact, the Queen Mary was much beloved by this country back when the moment she first sailed into New York on her maiden voyage, all the way to the last time she left New York on her 1001st voyage back to Southampton. So the thing was that the Queen Mary was deeply embedded in our American society. A lot of people today have some kind of connection with the Queen Mary. You can't really say that for the SS United States. I mean, generally, if you pick 100 people out of a crowd, you can at least find one person that has some kind of connection with the Queen Mary. The SS United States will be much more difficult to do that. And that's because I think one of the major factors is that Queen Mary was in World War II, transported all those American troops. SS United States wasn't in a war, so I think that really you'd have to have some kind of connection with somebody who traveled on the ship to get to, the UK or to the US as part of their destination. But that's kind of aside from the point. But the next big thing that separated Queen Mary from the SS United States in terms of why it was saved is because as soon as the Queen Mary came to Long Beach, they knew, the officials at Long Beach knew, that so the SOLAS standards, the safety of life at sea, I believe it's called, and then other maritime standards for safety and how ships must be operated, those standards were quickly going up and up and up to the point where the Queen Mary could no longer meet those standards. And as long as she was designated as a ship, she would have to meet those standards. And Long Beach knew that if they wanted to preserve the Queen Mary and protect it from those safety standards that would have required gutting the ship and doing a whole bunch of other things, they had to get the United States Coast Guard to redesignate the ship. And they did. The U.S. Coast Guard redesignated the Queen Mary as a floating building. So the Queen Mary is no longer, by technicality, considered a ship. She is considered a floating building. And that was a key factor in the preservation of the Queen Mary as opposed to the preservation of SS United States. Another important thing to remember is that the city of Long Beach did not pay taxpayer money at all for the Queen Mary. They never have. Since the Queen Mary arrived in 1967, they've never paid taxpayer money on the Queen Mary. It's always been either private funds or the biggest funding for the Queen Mary has mostly always been through the Tidelands Fund, the California Tidelands Fund, which I know it sounds like, oh, it's meant for natural conservation. You think tidelands and you think conservation. That's not what it is. The Tidelands Fund is mainly for the upkeep and maintenance of coastal areas of California, in the sense that if there's an abandoned waterfront wharf or something, the Tidelands Fund could technically be used by a city to restore that wharf or get rid of it or something to keep the waterfront clean. That's what the Tidelands Fund is for. And Long Beach would put, even to this day, put so much money into the Tidelands Fund because they have an oil fracking operation just right off the harbor and also off the coast. So they put so much money into it that they have a good say in what happens to that money. And Long Beach had the ability to say, we want this chunk of money for the Queen Mary for its upkeep, restoration, and turning it into a hotel. So when you really consider it, all the stars aligned for the Queen Mary. It was a bunch of things that were so difficult you might call them impossible. It was a city being able to use their Tidelands Fund to purchase the Queen Mary. It was being able to convince the Coast Guard to consider the Queen Mary a floating building. And they just so happened to have, I believe it's Pier H or Pier... Oh, yeah, I have no idea, actually. There's a pier that Queen Mary is currently located on. I always get it mixed up between Pier J, Pier E, and Pier H. So I forget. But anyway, the pier she's at, they had just constructed that a couple of years prior, and they thought, well, we have this brand new pier and really no better use for it, so now we have a permanent place to keep the Queen Mary, and the Queen Mary is part of the land that surrounds her. She's considered the same property. So the Queen Mary doesn't have to pay docking fees because the city who owns the ship also owns the pier. So the Queen Mary doesn't have to pay those docking fees. Those are all things that the SS United States really had to contend with. Pier J, yeah, that sounds about right, Pier J. I always get it confused, Pier J, Pier H, and Pier E. But anyway, because the Queen Mary did stuff at all those piers. But anyway, so that's the problems that the SS United States had to contend with. They didn't have, the SS United States didn't have a whole city that had the funding that they could move around to purchase it. The SS United States, they didn't have anybody to be able to convince the Coast Guard to deem it a floating building as opposed to a floating ship, and therefore as the various safety of life at sea standards and other maritime standards, as those went up over the years, they started taking a look at SS United States and said, look, this thing is a safety hazard, especially with all of its asbestos. And in 1993, 1994, it was sent away to have, the SS United States was sent away to have all of its asbestos removed, and that meant removing all of its historic interiors, which, in my opinion, was the final nail on the coffin for the SS United States, because how do you convince people that there is history to preserve when you show them the ship and there's nothing left? There was engines left. I believe there might be boilers left. But aside from that, all the pretty stuff that generally companies and rich individuals look at for preservation, none of that was there. So that's one of the final nails in the coffin, I think, for SS United States, was the fact that its interiors were all removed. And so, yeah, and finally, the difference, SS United States didn't have a place to go. The city of Long Beach had that pier that they owned, and they could put the Queen Mary there, and the Queen Mary wouldn't accrue any docking fees. SS United States didn't have that. There was nowhere for it to go. Anywhere it went, it would have to pay docking fees. So whoever owned the ship would have to pay these massive docking fees. And we know that became a huge problem, particularly in the last 2 years, because that's the whole reason why the SS United States had to leave its current dock, was because the dock that had it for the past 30 years said, look, we've had this thing for 30 years. We don't want it anymore. And we could charge so much more money for this dock. And, whether or not you think that's okay, that's up to you to decide. But, they're a business, and they want to charge ships for that dock, and the SS United States had been paying the same docking fee for quite a while, I hear. And so that was the reason why that wharf, that dock, whatever you want to call it, that pier, was like, you know what, we want to raise the rent. And the rent was just way too much at that point for the SS United States Conservancy to afford. And so that's that first topic. That's why the Queen Mary was saved, but not the SS United States. And I don't want people to think, oh, it's because, America cared more about a British ship than they cared about an American ship. That's not it at all. SS United States was just dealt so many bad hands that it really didn't have the ability, for it to be preserved all these years. And then, like I said, the final nail in the coffin was the fact that because it was still under requirements of safety standards and such, they had to remove all the asbestos, and that tore out all the interiors, and there was nothing left to save on the inside. So the next topic, I'm just reading through some of this, but the next topic, well, actually, I kind of already just went into the next topic, which was the asbestos removal, which was the final nail in the coffin. So that was the first two topics, actually. But the next topic is the problems with having an empty shell of a ship. Let's see here. Yeah, H.E. Budd writings. I'm sorry, I'm reading from someone whose username is Jersey Mike Subs. Yeah, so everybody's just kind of reiterating the things I've said. So I'm just making sure that I'm not skipping any good points that people are making here. All right, so the subtitles I highly doubt is what's showing is actually what Alex is saying. I'm unable to listen with volume up. Yeah, if you're watching live subtitles and I'm speaking quickly and probably not all that clearly, so if you're trying to watch with subtitles, it probably doesn't look that good. So the next topic is the problems with an empty shell. So, like we said, all the interiors of SS United States were removed. All the stuff that people would deem to be historic and beautiful on the ship was gone. There were artifacts that were saved, and the Conservancy owns many of them, and other people have them own pieces of the ship privately, things like that. But for the ship itself, it was completely empty. And I know that a lot of people would say, well, that means the ship is a blank canvas for which any company or wealthy individual can then paint their own restoration. And the thing is, and I know I've said that in the past too, but the thing is that it really doesn't work that way. So, first and foremost, and this is my opinion, but the SS United States has two architectural features that are prevalent on ships of its time. It has shear, which is the upwards curvature of the ship at both ends. That's for being able to ride over huge swells and allowing it to bend without breaking. It strengthens the upper decks of the ship. So it's got shear. It's also got camber, which is when you look straight down the ship, there's a kind of an upwards curve in the middle of the ship. And that also helps with, draining any leaks or any water, that kind of thing. It also adds strength to the ship as well. So those two things make it so almost every space on the ship is quite unique. It's different when you're building, let's say, a brick and mortar building, although this one's made of wood. You can think of every room as a box. It's square. You know that all the walls are going to be flat. You know all the ceilings and floors are going to be flat. You know that you can just purchase doors at Home Depot or something and then just install them. That is not the case for SS United States. Every room has a curvature to the ceiling and to the deck, or the overhead as they call it, and the deck. Every room has a curvature to the shape of the wall from the top and bottom. There's a curvature in some way. That means every door into every room on that ship would have to be a unique shape in order to match the slant of the ship. And it's if you want to install plumbing, I mean, my goodness, you have to figure out. Well, this is for the companies that develop onto the ship. They'd have to figure out, well, how do we get sewage from the higher end of the ship down to the middle end of the ship when it's on the same level? You have to consider all of that. And of course that doesn't take a genius. I mean, you just look at blueprints, but nevertheless, it is something where you can't just go to a company and say mass manufacture all these interiors so we can just install them real quick. It doesn't work like that. The ship has to be custom rebuilt in order to do all that stuff. So it automatically makes it a lot more expensive, as well as the fact that, once again, where are you going to keep this ship? Wherever you keep it, you're going to have to pay these exorbitant docking fees. And once in a while, the ship's going to need to undergo dry docking, and dry docking is hugely expensive here in the United States. That's why a lot of ships decide to go to Asian countries, because it's usually a lot cheaper in those various other countries. But here, it's exorbitantly expensive, as well as the costs of water, sewage, power, trash, all the utilities that go into running an operation like a hotel are extremely expensive. The Queen Mary gets around a lot of that stuff because it's owned by the city of Long Beach. The city of Long Beach can get discounts or credits or even waive certain fees for the Queen Mary. SS United States doesn't have that ability. Whoever owns it would have to do all that out of pocket. So that's kind of one of the things about the SS United States that that makes it difficult to build into and to restore and conserve, is that everything would have to be unique, and it would cost way more than just building a brick and mortar building somewhere, like what the Conservancy is doing, which is they're going to build a museum along the Florida coast that will, showcase the history of the SS United States. So that's just kind of one of the problems with that. So Wayne says the SS United States was not offered for sale until the 1970s. In 1979/1980, she was bought by a Seattle real estate developer. And all the interiors, furniture, art, china, silverware were auctioned off. Yeah, that makes sense, because it probably cost them a lot of money. They want to recoup those costs as soon as possible, so they sell away all of the, or auction off all of the items that can be removed, artworks, furniture, all that kind of stuff, silverware, everything that was valuable was auctioned off, so that way they could recoup those costs. They kind of did the same thing for the Queen Mary, except they did save a lot of stuff. But I'd say a good 75%, if not maybe 80% of everything that was aboard the Queen Mary was auctioned off over the next decade after she became a hotel and museum, to help recoup the costs of her being converted to a hotel. So that does make sense. I'm just reading people's comments just to make sure I'm not, if someone brings up a good point that I can talk about. Diamond asks, what would you think if Long Beach bought the SS United States, what would happen to the Queen Mary in your words? Well, I mean, let's just, quickly dispel the fact that Long Beach would never buy the SS United States. The Queen Mary, let me preface this by saying, a lot of people look at Queen Mary and how she wasn't profitable for the last 30 years before 2023. For those 30 years prior to 2023, she didn't really turn a profit all that often. And a lot of people blame the ship. They go, oh, the ship just doesn't make money. And to those people, I have to say, the ship is an inanimate object. It's not that the ship is a mule that refuses to work. If the ship doesn't turn a profit, it's because the management doesn't know what they're doing. That's with any business. You can't look at a restaurant and go, this restaurant just doesn't want to make money. It's a restaurant. If you're not making money, you're doing something wrong. So it's the same thing with the Queen Mary. I'm just prefacing what I'm about to say with this, is that don't blame the Queen Mary for that. That is the fault of previous management. If they didn't turn a profit, they weren't doing something right. This current management, which has opened the Queen Mary in 2023, they've been making a profit ever since. They know what they're doing. And, it's been a slow recovery because they've had 30 years of neglect to fix. The management was just handed this ship that was neglected for 30 years, and they said, look, we need you to fix it. And management said, okay, we're going to do this as best we can. And so it's been very slow going, but they've been doing it while turning a profit. So that is remarkable, actually. But anyway, what I was going to say was that Long Beach wouldn't buy the SS United States because they've already got their hands full with the Queen Mary. Trying to restore it. They're trying to make sure management is getting what they need to be able to restore the ship, as well as just making things happen. So they've got their hands full with the Queen Mary. But hypothetically speaking, if they did purchase the SS United States and put it next to the Queen Mary, which is a common thing that people tell me on my channel. They say, why doesn't Long Beach just buy the SS United States and put it next to the Queen Mary? Well, let's put it this way. Most of the people that visit the Queen Mary, I mean, there's a good chunk of people who are ocean liner fans. They know what the Queen Mary is. They know what they're going in for. But the majority of people who visit the Queen Mary are doing it because they go, oh, look, it's Titanic. And so they come to the ship expecting to see Titanic. But in any case, they're like, okay, here's this ship, on the most expensive of days, because they do have a tiered system of cost, but on the most expensive of days and the most expensive time of day to go on the ship, it costs $45, as well as the fact that you have to pay $18 for parking, which you can validate if you get food at one of the restaurants. If you have a reservation at one of the restaurants, even better, you get free admission. So just keep that in mind. But nevertheless, $18 for parking, $45 for admission. And they look at that and they go, okay, that's a lot of money. And if you imagine that the SS United States was right next to the Queen Mary, people aren't going to go, okay, I'm going to shell out, what was that, $58? No, I'm miscounting. $63. We go, okay, $63 for Queen Mary. Why don't I go ahead and spend another $63 for all of us in this group to go to the SS United States? They're not going to do that. They're going to choose one ship or the other. They're not going to go, oh, let's visit both on both days because we have tons of money to spend on ships. They're not going to do that. People are going to go, they're going to look at Queen Mary and go, oh, that one looks like Titanic. I'm going to go to Queen Mary. And then they might skip SS United States. Or it might be the opposite. They go, you know what, the Queen Mary looks antiquated, let's go on the SS United States. And then the Queen Mary suffers. So people are going to choose one or the other. The only people who are going to do both are people who have a lot of money to spend, or people who are ocean liner fans and they want to see both on the same day or something. But nevertheless, people are going to choose. If you look at, I used to work at Disneyland Resort in Anaheim, California, so I remember when California Adventure, the second park right across from Disneyland, was undergoing so many financial issues, because what was happening was, prior to 2012, when they redesigned the whole park, people were entering the Esplanade between both the Disneyland and California Adventure parks. And they were looking at it and going, I don't know what that is, but let's go to Disneyland. And that's what happened. People were picking and choosing. They were not choosing the Disney California Adventure. And people have to do that even to this day because both theme parks are so darn expensive. People are like, you know what? I'd rather spend a whole day in Disneyland than California Adventure. So it'd be the same thing with the Queen Mary and SS United States. People would pick and choose one or the other, and both ships would end up suffering equally. They would end up suffering from it because there's only so many people that are trickling in to come see the Queen Mary and SS United States, and to them, to these people who don't know much about ships, to them it's just like, okay, well, they're both old ships, I'm just going to pick one. So that's kind of the issue with that. But yeah, so I get asked that a lot, so I'm actually glad you asked me that because I do get that question a lot. Wait, okay, you said, sorry, I said it wrong. What if Long Beach already bought the SS United States and the Queen Mary wasn't bought yet? What do you think the Queen Mary's fate would be? Oh, Queen Mary's fate would probably be that of the SS United States, honestly. If SS United States went on sale, on auction, first, before the Queen Mary did in 1967, then I think Long Beach would have purchased the SS United States, and we would have seen SS United States in Long Beach all this time. And then Queen Mary, if she wasn't purchased by, I think the next biggest bid for the Queen Mary was New York City, and they wanted to turn her into a high school. So we probably, if that didn't pan out, then Queen Mary probably would have been sitting in Philadelphia all this time. Honestly, I think that would have been. I think the fate of SS United States would have happened to the Queen Mary, in my honest opinion. But if not, then Queen Mary probably would have ended up completely all the historic interiors removed, and then the whole thing turned into a high school. And then I think that high school would have only lasted a decade or so, because in the United States, schools are paid for by each state and each county. They put in their budgets towards schools, and no one's going to be able to afford the upkeep of a giant ship as a school. So it would have lasted 10 years at most, and then Queen Mary would have ended up scrapped, sunk, or even just, again, sitting in Philadelphia. So I think either way, if Queen Mary had not been purchased by Long Beach first, and it was SS United States instead, I think Queen Mary would have had the same fate as the SS United States. One of those ships would have had to be sacrificed. So I think that would have been, that would have been the case. So there's no way, just in case people are wondering, oh, would the high school still have been around? No. We don't spend that much money on our education here in the United States of America. No. Why would we? It's only kids that are going to grow up and be our future. Why would we put any money towards their education? So, so the ship would not have lasted. So, anyway, so the next thing the next talking point, the Conservancy had a lot to contend with. So I see a lot of people right now who are blaming the SS United States Conservancy. They're the organization, the nonprofit organization that owns the SS United States. They've had it for a while. I don't know how long. I'm sure you guys could tell me how long. But there are people who are blaming the Conservancy and saying, you didn't do enough. You didn't raise enough money. You didn't do enough to save the ship. And some people are even accusing them of stealing money, or maybe even laundering it or whatnot. I don't know enough about the Conservancy to put any legitimacy to any of those claims. I mean, some people claim, oh, they've been taking people's money for years and never using it for the restoration of the ship or something like that. I don't know if that's true or not. I honestly don't. And I don't want to automatically assume that that's true. Because a lot of people have been saying that about the Queen Mary, and I'm such a fanatic of the Queen Mary that over the years they've said, oh, well, Long Beach just uses the Queen Mary and doesn't put any money into it, and that's not true. Long Beach has always put money into the Queen Mary, but it's been the individual companies that ran the ship that would do nefarious things sometimes. And Long Beach, they shot themselves in the foot at the time with this really horrible lease situation that they had. They had a lease agreement that said whoever leases the ship has full control of the ship, and Long Beach, the city, has very little input as to how they run things. They shot themselves in the foot with that. And when the previous company, Urban Commons, went belly up, the city was able to take back control. A judge was able to render that lease situation completely void and null. The lease no longer exists. Now the city of Long Beach, they've always owned the ship, but now they fully have control of it. They have every right to say what happens on that ship, and what they do is they contract out a third-party company to run the daily operations of the ship and to come up with ideas for new attractions. So that's what happens there. But with the Conservancy of the SS United States, I'm reluctant to believe that they're nefarious people. I mean, it's led by the granddaughter of the original engineer of the ship, the original architect. Susan Gibbs, I believe her name is. And so I have a hard time believing that, she's just back there pocketing money. Here's what I think was going on. They were paying, what, like $75,000 a month, was it? Was it that much? I think it was like $75,000 a month for the docking fees of keeping the ship there. And I'm sure there were probably other fees that they had to pay, like environmental fees and whatnot, because obviously the ship is, all the paint is flaking and dropping into the water. That paint probably contains lead and whatnot. So they're probably paying all kinds of fees for the ship. And I think those fees just consumed all the money that ever came in for the ship. I really believe that if there was huge sums of money going in, something would have been done. But at the same time, let's just say they do a fundraiser, right? And they're able to raise, I don't know, they're able to raise $100,000 on a fundraiser. That's a lot of money, right? But that's nowhere near enough money to put the ship in dry dock, to have it inspected, cleaned, and then repainted, for instance. It's not nearly enough money. I mean, it costs $5 million to fully repaint the Queen Mary, and SS United States is almost the same size as Queen Mary. I imagine it would cost at least $4 million to repaint the ship, the SS United States alone. $4 million. Because you'd also have to pay for hazmat teams to scrape off all that lead paint. And of course, they take much more care of the scraping of the paint because it's all lead. So I imagine that even if they held this huge fundraiser and they raised $1 million, $2 million, maybe even $3 million, it still wouldn't have been enough money to do anything for that ship. So, I mean, it would have been enough to pay the docking fees for a year if they got $3 million from a fundraiser. And $3 million for a fundraiser is a pretty big deal for a ship that has, no foreseeable future, So, when you do a fundraiser, I can speak from experience because, I do know a bit about the inner workings of a nonprofit. I used to be on the board of QMI Restore the Queen, a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the Queen Mary. And I do know that with fundraisers, you can hold these huge fundraisers, and you'd be lucky if you got $5,000 raised. And that's for the Queen Mary. That's for a ship that already has its historic interiors. It's already open to the public, and that whatever money you pour into it, into the nonprofit, will go directly towards the restoration of the ship. the SS United States was not technically publicly open. I mean, they did offer some tours, but it was not a giant tourist attraction. And so any money that people were able to donate towards the ship, they knew in the back of their minds at least that there was a good chance that that money would only go towards paying the docking fees, because it would cost literally tens of millions just to do the bare minimum, like repaint the ship and get some electricity on there so they could do some stuff, you know. So I don't think that there was anything nefarious going on with the Conservancy. I think they were in over their heads with bills, honestly. So, I'm just reading people's comments. Wow, there's a lot of people here. I think this is the most people I've ever had on a live stream at the same time. My goodness, 115 people, and it's still growing. So the next talking point that I wanted to mention, I think would actually be the last one. And folks, if you're just tuning in, I've already gone through 4 different talking points about the SS United States. We talked about why the Queen Mary was saved, but not the SS United States. You know, a quick little summary. No, it's not because the people of the United States of America care more about a British ship than they care about the SS United States. It was just bad timing. Honestly, if SS United States had gone up for auction before the Queen Mary went up for auction, I'm sure the city of Long Beach would have purchased the SS United States instead. SS United States just got dealt a bad hand, and then the SS United States was never designated a historic building the way Queen Mary was, so therefore it was subjected to safety standards that required the removal of all of its interiors just to remove the asbestos. So SS United States lost all of its historic interiors, and there's very little left to save on the ship, you know. So that's the first talking point. We talked about the asbestos removal being the final nail in the coffin of the ship. People think the final nail in the coffin of the ship was, you know, what happened last year with the docking fees being raised and all of that. No, honestly, if you really think about it, the final nail in the coffin was the removal of the SS United States' interiors, because that made it so nobody really was willing to put money, a ton of money, into the restoration of the ship. I know there's some people that come up with figures like $750 million for the restoration of the ship. I don't know if that's accurate. I mean, some people say, oh, it can't be $750 million. Let's just say it was $300 million, which I think is a safe bet, right? Because to fully restore the Queen Mary, I think will require another $150 million. I know the original numbers was $289 million, but $45 million has already been spent on the Queen Mary for the restoration, and they discovered that all the figures were much bigger than the reality of how much it costs to restore the Queen Mary. So they're thinking now that the total price is about $150 million for the restoration of the Queen Mary, and they've already spent 45 of that. So I think it's safe to say that for a ship that has nothing left on the inside, like the SS United States, $300 million sounds like a pretty reasonable number for full restoration of the ship. And I think that's even being overly conservative about it. I think it could cost up to $400 million. So, anyway, yeah, it's, when you think about it, the removal of the interiors, final nail in the coffin. We also talked about the problems with having an empty shell. You know, the fact that the ship is such a unique shape. It's not like building a brick and mortar building where everything has flat walls, flat ceilings, flat floors. The whole ship is shaped kind of like a banana, and it's also got a camber to it, which makes if you look at a cross section of the ship, you know, when you're looking straight at it and you cut it in half, there's a bowing up in the center called camber, and that also affects the shape of the ship. So anything that's done with the interiors of the ship would have to be custom. You couldn't even purchase doors from Home Depot. You'd have to build your own to fit the shape of the ship. So there's that. We talked about the Conservancy, what they had to contend with. That was the previous talking point we just finished, which was about the fact that they had a lot of fees, docking fees, probably environmental fees they had to pay because the ship is toxic to the environment. And then any money you raise, like I said, to repaint the Queen Mary, $5 million. Let's just say it's $4 million to repaint the SS United States because it's a slightly smaller ship. Even then, you go and you raise all this money at a fundraiser. I worked at a what am I trying to say? A nonprofit. They've raised funds for the Queen Mary, and they're lucky if they get $5,000 out of that. Now, let's just say that the Conservancy was able to do this massive fundraiser and raise $3 million, a completely ridiculous amount of money, $3 million for a fundraiser for a ship that has no foreseeable future. That'd be a good amount. Still wouldn't be enough to pay for even repainting the ship. So I think the Conservancy had a lot to contend with. I don't think there was anything nefarious going on. But the final talking point that I wanted to kind of mention is Okaloosa County, Florida, who purchased the SS United States. They're the ones that are paying, I think in total the whole thing is $10 million. But that $10 million went towards purchasing SS United States, which I think sold for $1 million. So they purchased the SS United States. They're paying for it to be towed, which has got to be in the millions to tow it, like 2,000 miles, I think it is. Yeah, I think it's 2,000 miles. So tow it 2,000 miles from Philadelphia to Mobile, Alabama, and then to tow it from Mobile, Alabama to the coast of Okaloosa. So millions of dollars there. And then they're paying for, when it gets to Alabama, they got to pay people, hazmat teams, to clean up the ship, get all of its paint scraped off, and then to prep the rest of the interiors of the ship as well for sinking, making sure that there's no oils and fuels and things that will leak into the water, make sure it's not going to kill the environment that it sinks into. So there's that, And then finally, they're also putting in some money towards a land-based museum. And the museum, I think, looks kind of cool. They've shown some concept art of it. It will be a museum that will sit... It'll look like the upper forward superstructure of the ship, complete with one original funnel from the SS United States, and also an original mast. They have the center mast right in front of the funnel. That will be there, as well as the fact that they will also have the propeller. So that right now on the SS United States, on the stern, they have one of the final remaining propellers of the ship. That will be restored and also put in front of the museum as well. And it'll look like the forward superstructure of the ship. It'll even have 2 of those boom cranes out front. I don't know if it'll be the original boom cranes or if they're just going to replicate them. They're probably going to be original. But then the interiors of the museum will have all these artifacts and things from the SS United States. They'll probably recreate the bridge even, so you can walk up into the bridge and see what the bridge looked like. So it'll be a really cool museum. And this is a challenging match for Alex's channel. It says Skip's Happy Hour. Thank you so much, Aaron. But the question is, so people know that there is an organization out there. I forget their name. Honestly, they're like something like the Committee for the Preservation of the SS United States. Anyway, they're a group of people, some of them wealthy, some of them, not wealthy. I don't know what they're called. They're not poor. But there's a committee who is claiming I think they're even putting forth a lawsuit in Alabama to prevent the SS United States from sinking. And so there's a lot of people looking at this and going, well, that's what's going to save the ship. We gotta support them because they're going to prevent the ship from getting scrapped and getting, and getting sunk. But you got to think about the hypotheticals of it. So, will an Alabama judge rule in favor of saving the ship. Why would he? The ship, the Okaloosa County who purchased it, they're not technically doing anything wrong. Yes, the ship is on a list of historic places, but just because it's on a list of historic places doesn't necessarily mean that it's illegal to demolish a historic place. I mean, it just means that it's on a list of places that if you look up the list, you can find it. That's really all historic places are. I mean, Queen Mary is on the National Register of Historic Places. That does nothing for the ship. It doesn't benefit the ship in any way other than the fact that it's on an official list and you can claim that it has that title. But it doesn't provide any protections for the Queen Mary. Why would it provide any protections for the SS United States? So that's the first thing that a judge will look at is, are there any protections in place that Okaloosa County is violating? Not really. Not in my opinion, unless there's something I missed. But there's nothing that they're violating. Then you also have to consider that, was the transaction legal? Did the money go towards what it was said it was going for? And so far, everything looks to be legal, so, I mean, we don't have any reason to believe that there isn't. But then you also have to look at, okay, let's just say, hypothetically speaking, that the judge says, you cannot demolish this ship, it violates some kind of rule that this committee is claiming it violates. Then what happens? Someone will have to hold on to that ship. And a judge, I do not see a judge forcing Okaloosa County to hold on to it. Because a judge will look at it and go, okay, let's just say we force Okaloosa County to hold on to the ship. What then? We can't force them to restore it. It's not legal. You can't tell a company, oh, you know what, you bought it for this reason, but now you have to restore it. They can't do that. That's not legal. They can say you must sell it, but even then, a judge will say sell it for the price you bought it, right? And then they're gonna claim it's $10 million. I don't see anyone spending $10 million to purchase the ship, and then spend another $400 million restoring it, and then spending money on giving it someplace to dock permanently. I mean, there was somebody who commented on my channel, I think just yesterday, who said, oh, I'm sure there's plenty of slips in Florida that would hold the ship for free. And I'm thinking, that can't be true. Because let's just pretend, each and every one of you watching, you own a dock, right? You own a dock, and you probably pay exorbitant fees to the county or the state for owning that dock, and it's a huge dock, right? Big enough to fit the SS United States. It probably costs you so much money, you're like, I need to make money off of this. So you need to charge rent, you need to charge docking fees. SS United States, let's just say someone says, oh, we can keep it here for a month. That might be the case, but no one's gonna agree to keep it there indefinitely without any promise of receiving a docking fee. I mean, that's 1,000 and something feet of dock that you're just willing to hand over for free. I just don't see that happening. The amount of money it costs to pay for that dock and keep it licensed and everything, I don't see that happening. So the judge is going to look at that and go, okay, well, we can force Okaloosa County to sell it, but we can't force them to restore it. That's not what they purchased it for. If they purchased it for restoration, we can force them to restore it. We can tell them, pay for its restoration or else, contempt of court or something. But they purchased it for the sake of sinking it. So the judge can't say you are forced to restore it. So then what happens? Well, the committee that is trying to save the ship, they don't have the money to hold the ship anywhere or to restore it. They know very well that if they sue, they're not going to get awarded the ship. They're going to get awarded the right to buy the ship. Do they have $10 million sitting around to purchase the ship? Maybe. Do they have an extra $400 million to restore it? I doubt it. And then they're going to need to find someone who will pay for that. Well, then that just puts the ship back into the same loop it was for the past 30 some odd years, which is who will step forward to pay for the restoration of this ship? It's not easy. You know, all these rich people, some of them are very generous in the sense that they might part ways with several tens of millions of dollars for something they're passionate about. Jay Leno, for instance, is one of those millionaires who is known for parting ways with large sums of money to restore cars and things like that. He's a big fan of steam engines, you know, so we know he would do something like that, but there aren't very many Jay Lenos out there. The majority of those wealthy people want to see a return on their investment. And there's no guarantee that once you restore the SS United States, that it'll be a huge success. I mean, the Queen Mary sees 2.5 million visitors a year, which sounds like a huge number, but the ship really needs to see twice that many. It needs to see 4 million to 4.5 million people a year to really be a huge success, honestly. And if the Queen Mary is struggling to pull in those numbers, they're going to be like, well, you know, what other ships? Okay, well, there's, you know, SS Rotterdam. It's a profitable ship, but I think only marginally. I don't think it's this huge, overwhelming success. It's profitable, and that's, you know, good on them. They turn a profit. QE2, I think they probably spend more money to keep it running than they actually earn. And so, again, just like with the Queen Mary, I don't want to point blame at these organizations and say, you know, like, oh, your ship just doesn't earn money. I think it's more a situation of, are we doing the right things to earn this money? But nevertheless, you tell wealthy people, purchase the SS United States, restore it. They're going to look at those non-profiting ships, or the ones that even have marginal profit, like Queen Mary and SS Rotterdam, and they might go, what's the point? Why would we collectively invest hundreds of millions into a ship that might maybe turn a profit? And then where are we going to put it? You put it in the Hudson River or something, where they're going to pay $1 million a year in fees. Probably more than that, actually. I heard that a whole year's worth of docking fees for something that big would probably be more than $1 million a year. You have to pay tons of money to keep it there. You know, so I just don't see it happening. And like I said with the very first point, for the Queen Mary, the stars aligned. All these things that seemingly would be impossible to bless the ship suddenly came forward and happened. They have a dock they never have to pay docking fees for. So, you know, that's a huge benefit for the Queen Mary. It would just be so difficult for me to see a future forward for SS United States. So, and it's not that, I want to tell people that it's not that I don't want to see the SS United States restored. I know it's not my favorite ship, but that doesn't mean I want to see it sunk. It just means that maybe I'm blind or something, but I don't see a way forward for the ship in terms of preservation. Every way I look at it, and I've spent the last hour talking about this, every way I look at it, I don't see a future for the ship. I've really tried. I mean, honestly, this past year, I've really looked at it inside and out, forward and back, and tried to think, what if? And I think that it would take a massive infusion of money from the U.S. government itself to do it. Which brings us probably to the next point that isn't even on my list of talking points. Some people say, well, you know, the committee sent an email to the Trump administration, hoping that Donald Trump will save the ship and he'll put forth government money to restore the ship and, and save it and preserve it. And of course to find a place for it. Is it possible? Yeah, I think Trump has the power to do that. I think Trump has the power to make the government purchase the ship from Okaloosa County. If they purchase it for more than what Okaloosa paid for it, I think Okaloosa would sell it. If the Trump administration said, here's $15 million for the ship, I think Okaloosa County would say, okay, fair enough. Yeah, here you go. But the question is, would Trump do that? Would Trump pay for the restoration of the ship and pay to purchase the ship? And, it's not his money, I know. It'd be the U.S. government's money, but I don't see it happening. And the reason why, I know a lot of people say, well, Trump, he considers himself a huge patriot, and of course, what's more patriotic than saving the SS United States? That makes sense. I will admit that does make sense. He brands himself as a patriot. You would think that he would want to save this ship. But he looks at things very practically, and whatever you think, whether he's a legitimate businessman or whether you think he cheats people out of businesses and his businesses end up running to the ground, whichever way you think about it, he does look at things pragmatically. He looks at things as, how can I make money off of that? That's what a businessman does. I mean, whether or not you believe he's a legitimate businessman is a whole other deal. But he does look at things from a business standpoint and say, can I benefit from this? Can I make money off of this? And he would look at that for the country as well. He would say, can the country of the United States make a benefit from this? Can we make some kind of deal that earns us money? And how will it benefit the not the SS, but the United States of America? And when you really think about it that way, I don't think he would save it. He would also see it as a money pit. He would see it as something that would constantly need infusions of money in order to keep it viable. And you'd have to convince people that it's a place to visit, a place to see. It's not impossible. I don't think it's impossible to say that Trump would save it. But I see it as not likely. Just because from his business acumen, he would just look at it as, what do I benefit? What do we benefit from it? And it has to have a monetary value. I don't think he's a very nostalgic person. I really don't think so. You really look at everything, I don't think he has nostalgia for things. I don't think he will go, you know what, let's save this ship because it's part of our history and our posterity and, future posterity, I guess I should say. But I think he looks at it as money. Does it make money? Does it burn money? And I think he'd be very hard-pressed to see it from that perspective, to see it making money. So I do. I see it as a major issue. I don't know that the SS United States can pull in enough money to pay for its restoration and its docking. I mean, you're talking about recouping $400 million plus an extra $1 million every month, every year. I mean, it really depends on where it's docked, but I mean, gosh, it's just a lot. It's a lot to really consider. So, let's see. Yeah, I mean, you also think about, like, what's happening with Doge and stuff, and I'm going to try to be non-partisan with these opinions, but you look at what's happening with Doge, for instance, and they're looking for ways. They're saying they're looking for ways to save the country money, and to do all that. So if that's what they're doing, then where does the SS United States fit in with that? Does it save the country money? I think Elon Musk would have something to say with, let's not sink all this money that we're trying to save into a ship that will cost a bunch of money. So, right now, Trump and Elon, and then the rest of the administration, they're looking for ways to make the country run cheaper. I mean, they just got rid of, what was it, 1,000 National Park Service people in order to try to save money in that sector. If Trump saved the SS United States, he would probably put it under the protection of the National Park Service, which makes sense, and he would probably deem it a national monument even, so that its monument status would help pay for it. The government would pay in towards the monument status of it. And if he did that, he would only be raising the cost of those departments. And they're trying to reduce the cost of those departments right now. I mean, like I said, they just got rid of 1,000 people from National Park Service. So you're going to have to hire some of those people back. Or, I mean, in the places of those people. You have to hire those positions back to put that towards SS United States. I don't know. I'm not sure. I mean, there is a good point to be made that he will see it as an opportunity to... I mean, he's a showman, right? So he's used to being on television, that kind of thing. He loves to show things that will make him look good. I think anybody would, honestly. If he does something that he thinks is good and he wants to show it to people, he will. So SS United States, if he saves it, he's going to want to show it off. He's going to want to make it into this big thing and say, look, we just saved the ship that represents this country and all of that sort of stuff. So there is a point to be made that he would want to make a big deal out of it. But then again, like I said, as a businessman, and he does think in terms of not nostalgia, but money. Does it make money or does it burn money? And if it burns money, he's going to say his catchphrase, you're fired. So it is difficult to think whether he would save it or not. Honestly, I'm on the fence about that. It could go either way. But I think I'm leaning towards, I don't think he will. And plus, the administration was sent that email a couple days ago. They haven't responded. They haven't even said, let us think about it. They just haven't responded. I don't know that they will. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on it. Some people are, when did this get political? Well, I'm trying to be non-partisan for that last bit that I just said, because I think that what matters more to me on this channel is talking about the ship rather than the politics. And so I think that in order for me to be at all legitimate, I have to look at things pragmatically and go, okay, well, what would Trump think? And not apply my own thoughts as to, like, will he save it, will he not save it, but to apply the thought of, how would Trump think of this? And I believe that he would look at it as, is this a moneymaker or a money burner? So yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I see it, And honestly, it could go either way, but I'm leaning towards, I don't think he'll save it. I just don't, I don't know that he's a nostalgic man. The only reason I would see him saving it is to make a statement about the country. But that would be a $400 million statement. You know what I'm saying? Like that would be quite the expensive statement. So yeah, I don't know. It is such a toss up on that last part. Such a toss up. Yeah. Yeah, S11 says weirder things have happened. I mean, that is absolutely true. So, I mean, you never know. You never know. But, and then, but on a side topic, about, so I know a lot of people, we talk about history. Does the people of this country, do they care about history, or is history a thing of the past? Essentially, like, do young people care? And you know, I used to be very pessimistic about it. I used to say, no, people my age and younger don't care about history. They just care about TikTok or whatever. And that, I really did hold that opinion, but over the last 5 years of being a fan of ocean liners and Queen Mary, particularly Queen Mary, I have noticed there is a huge number of young people that do care. I mean, even in my chat right now, I think I can count, just without even scrolling, there's already 2 people that I know are under the age of 18 who are fans of ships and history. So, yeah, let's not mention TikTok. Yeah, I know. Oh man. I have some, maybe it's because I'm old or something. I'm not that old, honestly, but I feel old at times. I'm just like, what is the point of TikTok? I'm just like, what is going on with that? But anyway, yeah, I'm one of those people that I'm like, we don't need TikTok. I mean, YouTube is a toss-up, right? Because YouTube, you can have these people that are, complete buffoons making really dumb videos that do nothing but rot your brain. But on the other hand, you have people who are teaching people things. I mean, I think at least once a day I like to learn something new. And it's not even about ships even. It's just about anything. Once a day I like to learn something new. And sometimes it's something I read, and sometimes it's something I watch on YouTube. And I'm able to just learn something about maybe history or science or whatnot, and it's available on YouTube. So I see YouTube as a platform that can be very beneficial. But then I look at TikTok, I'm like, I know there are some people who are on TikTok who are doing good things, but then TikTok, I think as a whole, just is a bad thing. I don't think we need it. I mean, look at all these people doing these TikTok challenges and stuff. I mean, kids every day are. I even have to be careful what I say on YouTube, because YouTube will be like, you can't say that word, but kids are deleting themselves from this earth over TikTok challenges. I just, yeah, I think overall that's a bad platform. But anyway, as for like whether or not young people like history, I think what it is. Okay, I used to be under the belief that younger people don't care about history, because even when I was growing up, I felt like sometimes I was so alone in my love for history. People around me would roll their eyes or whatnot. Even my family, they weren't that interested. I mean, they do. My family does like history, but when I would talk about it, they would just roll their eyes. I'd be like, oh, okay. But here's what I think is really what's going on. I think kids today, they have the capacity to be interested. I know they sometimes say, oh, nobody needs to know history. History sucks. But they say that because when people have tried to talk to them about history, it's usually in a very boring setting with a very boring way of introducing it. I think kids today, they're so used to games and TV and stuff like that and movies that the only way they can be interested in history is if they see something really cool happen that is historic. I mean, kids still go to really awesome action movies that take place in the past, you know? Kids still go to see stuff like that. I mean, I'm trying to think of like a more recent movie that takes place in the past, but I mean, honestly, I don't watch that many movies anymore. But, you know, like, I mean, just for instance, Titanic is a really, really good example of that. When I was growing up, kids were not interested in things like Titanic. But then James Cameron comes out with his movie, and it shows this massive destruction. It is a disaster movie, you know, turned up to 10. And next thing you know, all the kids around me, they want to buy Titanic toys and models and Lego. Well, they didn't have Titanic Lego back then. We had to build our own Titanics out of Lego and stuff like that. And there's their connection. They see something that they think is so crazy or cool. I mean, let's face it. Some people think the sinking of Titanic was cool, which I don't like that. But nevertheless, they make that emotional connection. And then they find Titanic to be interesting. And they discover it, they learn about it, and that's how it goes. I think kids today, when they're taught history, it's in a very boring setting. I think when they're shown something that is really interesting about history, and they're introduced to that, and they're shown it in a way that's entertaining, I think that's when they love it. Because there are young people, I mean, when I was on the Queen Mary earlier in February, I met two young people, two boys. One boy was with one family, one boy was with another family. But I met two boys that were probably, I think, under 10 years old. I don't remember, but one was Mac, one was Justin. And they're so interested in the Queen Mary. They love the Queen Mary. And I think it's things like my videos where I've purposefully gone in to the history. And I know I'm jumping around, but let me just say how I do my videos is instead of just reading off a bullet point of the history going in 1936, the Queen Mary was, had its maiden voyage, and in 1940 the Queen Mary entered the war. But instead of reading a list of bullet points, I look at the history and I go, okay, what's interesting? What's interesting? Oh, the Queen Mary was struck by a 92-foot rogue wave in 1942. It keeled over 52 degrees. 3 more degrees, it would have completely capsized, but then it righted itself. And I look at that and I go, okay, we got a story brewing. We got a story about a ship that survives. And I take that and I use that as the narrative to tell the history. So in my most recent video, Queen Mary the Survivor, that's my most recent history video about the Queen Mary, I tell the history of the ship in a way that talks about it as a survivor. And I use that as the story narrative. And again, history isn't necessarily a story, but you can make it into a story. And I think that's what kids are interested in. They want to be told a story, and a good story at that. And so I think that we can teach our kids and to teach other young kids about history if we can make it more interesting. Instead of just reading a list of bullet points and say, oh, this happened at this year and this, you talk about it and you go, there was this man, named Curly Bill, and he was the head of the Cowboys, and they took over the city of Tombstone, and nobody thought that they could be challenged. And then comes a retired lawman, Wyatt Earp, who comes in and changes things around. If you make it interesting, they will think it's interesting. And I think now that's my new opinion on it. So Um, so yeah, I think kids today, they're ready to be interested in history. They just need someone to make it cool, you know? And I'm trying. I'm trying. I'm working on a video right now that hopefully will come out next week about the origins of the city of San Francisco. Because I think the origins of the city are really, really interesting. And I want to kind of, paint it as a city that is forever changing. So, yeah. So, let's see here. Just gonna read some comments, and RMS Titanic says Queen Mary rammed a boat. Yes, the Queen Mary had accidentally sliced the Allied British cruiser HMS Kurosawa in half. That was by accident. The Queen Mary was on a zigzag route. Kurosawa was escorting it to its destination in Scotland to drop off its troops, and Kurosawa thought, oh, the Queen Mary will move out of our way because we're the escort ship, and Queen Mary thought, oh, Kurosawa will move out of the way because we take precedence. Both of them were wrong about what each other thought, and as Queen Mary turned towards Kurosawa, by the time the people on Kurosawa decided to take action, it was too late, and the Queen Mary sliced them in half, killed 338 British men on that ship. I think 111, if I'm remembering correctly, survived. But man, that was a really bad disaster, and it was hidden from people till the end of the war, because the War Department, the British War Department, did not want anybody to know about that, or else it might make the public feel like, well, they wanted to keep spirits high about the war. Winston Churchill, say what you will about him being a genocider and all that kind of stuff. Winston Churchill, I think, was the best person to defeat Hitler, honestly. I mean, he was ruthless, no doubt about it. He did things that we should never do. But Winston Churchill was the only man at the time who could do it. And he did it. And he defeated Hitler. And, but he knew the psychology of people. He knew that if he told the public about Kurosawa being sliced in half by Queen Mary, a lot of people would be upset, there would be a lot of chaos, and a lot of people would be sad. And it would lower people's confidence in Britain's ability to win the war. And Churchill knew that. Was it right for him to keep that information from people? Absolutely not. It was not right. But in doing what he did, he was able to keep people's spirits high through the war, which no doubt had an effect on the ability to win the war. Because, any psychiatrist or psychologist will tell you that accomplishing a goal, for the most part, depends on how you look at it. If you believe you will accomplish a goal, if you believe in yourself, you're more likely to complete that goal. Whereas if you think that it can't be done, you're more likely not to complete that goal. So yeah, what he did was horrible and unforgivable. But at the same time, he saved people from Hitler. So, I mean, it's messy. And that's what I love about history. It's messy. Good people do bad things, bad people do good things. It's messy. It's absolutely messy. And, and there are very few people in history that I would even deem to be evil or not evil. But I would say that the majority of people that I put in my list of actual evil would be the Nazi Party and, of course, Hitler himself. But other than that, there are a lot of other historical figures outside of war that, they have good sides and bad sides to them. And understanding that people are really complex people, I think, is really important. I think because, especially in the United States, here in the U.S., we we've been conditioned to think of things in terms of good versus evil, bad versus good, and all that kind of stuff. That, you know, there's someone always to point a finger at, to blame. You know, even our movies are geared that way. Our movies are designed so that way there's always a villain or someone to point your finger at. And movies that don't have a villain, movies where it's just a situation that happens, don't often do very good, because our society here in the U.S., we like to have someone to blame. And I think that's an interesting part of psychology too. So, especially when it comes to the SS United States, because people want someone to blame. They want someone to point a finger at. They want to be able to find someone and say, you're the reason why this ship is being sunk. And I think in reality, the SS United States was dealt a lot of bad hands. Just things just didn't work out for it. And it was a messy, messy situation. And that's why the ship is being sunk. And there's a lot of people right now who need someone to blame. And some people are blaming the Queen Mary. Of all things, they're like, oh, America saved the Queen Mary, but not the SS United States. And again, it's like, America did not save the Queen Mary. The city of Long Beach saved the Queen Mary, not America. America had nothing to do with the Queen Mary. So that's kind of the point I'm making. I know I kind of go in and out of the conversation all over the place, but I think that's the stuff that needs to be said. And I'm going to answer some questions real quick, and then I think I'll end the live stream soon, because I don't think anybody wants to sit through a 2-hour live stream when I've already finished all my talking points. But I'll see if anybody has any questions or something. That Kat says, is it true that they used the bathtub on Queen Mary to test the models for the D-Day invasion? That is true. Winston Churchill, on one of his crossings to Quebec, Canada, he was taking the Queen Mary from the UK to Quebec, so that way he could meet with the D-Day Planning Committee. And he brought with him models of the Mulberry Harbors. The Mulberry Harbors were these, what do you call them? They're floating docks and piers that could be set up so that way they could move troops and supplies from the ships onto the shore. So while there were the initial, I forget the term, I'm not very good at war terms, but there were these little boats that delivered the troops to the battle. Well, they went first, but then to reinforce them, to come behind them and continue to force their way into France, there were supply ships that were offshore waiting to unload more troops and more supplies. And those ships are so big, they needed artificial harbors, artificial docks and things like that could be quickly set up to unload everything. And so the Mulberry Harbors were designed to float on the water and provide a pier straight to the land. And Winston Churchill brought models of them to prove that it could be done, because at this time that had never been done before. Setting up a pier in a matter of hours that could float and go all the way from a ship to shore. He brought those models onto the ship, and then they tested them in the bathtub of his suite. They filled the bathtub. There was an admiral there with him, and they set up the little models, and he had the admiral making waves in the water with his hands to test that the models would not come apart even with the roughest waves. And they did that from evening till like 5 in the morning, because Winston insisted they keep on testing it to see where the models would fail, and that way he could address those issues. But anyway, yeah, supposedly Winston's wife, Clementine, I don't know how to pronounce it, Clementine or Clementine, his wife wanted to take a bath, but he was using the bathtub, so she had to go to a suite next door to use the bathtub. So, and that was done while there were, other war officials and stuff on the ship. The ship was going from the UK to the United States. So since it was going in that direction, the only people on board was Winston Churchill and his war party, as well as prisoners of war, POWs. They were locked in the cargo holds of the Queen Mary. But there may have been a few troops who were injured from the war and were being sent back home aboard the Queen Mary, so they might have been other passengers, but the ship would have been traveling really light. Really, really light. Because the you know, it's obviously people going from North America to Scotland or the UK. That's when the ship would be full of troops. Let's see. Nova says, last try to get his attention. Alex, the SS United States is heading to where I live. I actually wanted to set up GoPros on the ship and share you footage if the scuba divers help recover. GoPros on the ship and share you footage. Scuba divers help recover. You mean after it is sunk, you want to share footage of it? I don't know what I would do with that footage, honestly. I don't have a use for it. But I mean, if you post it to YouTube or something, I'll watch the video. But I don't really have a use for that footage. Yeah, I can't think of anything. Armis Titanic says, what do you think William Francis Gibbs would have done if he was still alive today? I don't know. I don't really know anything about him aside from his ideas on how he designed the SS United States, but I don't know much about him or what he thinks of things. I mean, I probably know more about, you know, Her Majesty Queen Mary than I know about Francis Gibbs, so I really don't know. I'm sure he would be upset that the SS United States is being sunk. Thank you, Justin. It's good to see you. Let's see here. Diamond says, do you think they will ever open the museum in the first engine room on the Queen Mary? The museum. What museum? Right now, there's where the first engine room was. I'm assuming you mean the forward engine room. There's nothing there. It's a giant open exhibit hall. So there's nothing inside right now. And as far as I know, they don't have any plans for what will go in there. So I don't know. Hyperdog says, do you agree with the SS United States coalition? Well, I just actually mentioned that. That was one of the final talking points of the live stream, was what they plan to do and what they're doing. And what they're doing, like I said, I don't think it'll work. Because if they get a judge to agree to save the ship, the judge cannot force Okaloosa County to restore the ship. They can only force them to sell it. And then the committee, the coalition, they don't have the money to purchase it, because the total sum of money that Okaloosa County has dedicated towards all of this was $10 million. So the coalition would have to pay $10 million to buy it back from Okaloosa County if a judge forced them to sell it. And then where would they put it? The coalition doesn't have a place to put the ship anywhere, and they don't have any donors ready to donate enough money to restore the ship. So the ship would just end up back in the same situation it was, which is sitting somewhere at a temporary dock where it would not permanently be housed, and then they would be in the same issue that the United States Conservancy had, which was not being able to find any way to fund it. So there would literally be no hope for the ship even after they saved it. There'd be no hope for it. So yeah, I don't think what they're doing is really going to be beneficial for the ship at all. I think what they're doing is a way to beat a dead horse. I really don't think that that they have any idea what they're going to do after the ship is saved, if they're able to get it to be saved. So yeah, at least they haven't announced it yet, that's for sure. Diana says, thank you for making these videos. My pleasure. I mean, Alex says, what are your thoughts on development plans surrounding the Queen Mary, shopping, entertainment, etc.? Do you think it's unrealistic? Um, no, I don't think it's unrealistic at all. Because that's a lot of waterfront property when you really think about it. There's about 45 acres in total. I think 25 acres of that is the actual land. But they're in total, including water and the park nearby, that's 45 acres. Yeah, that's a lot of waterfront property. It's extremely valuable. So I can see a future forward for development of the land. I don't think it's infeasible at all. I think it's very, very possible. It wouldn't be necessarily a shopping district. I mean, I'm sure there would be a couple of stores here and there, but I think mainly it would be an entertainment district, an entertainment and dining district, because that's what's still popular. Shopping districts, not so much, but entertainment and dining, I can see that happening. Okay. That's my question too. What do you think of the development plans in the near future for around the Queen Mary site, like the concert arena? The concert arena, so the one that they're building on the parking lot, that one's temporary until they build the more permanent one, which will be in place of... There's a park, a city park, just in front of the bow of the Queen Mary, and that's where they want to build the permanent arena. And I think that's fine. I like that idea. In fact, I've come up with ideas of my own on how they could develop that property, and in every single one of them, that concert venue is in every one of them, because I think it's a good idea. Yeah. Mark says, wow, 128 watching. I know, it's crazy. I had up to 130 earlier, people watching all at once. So this was a popular topic. Okay, well, folks, I only want to answer questions that relate to the SS United States, because that's what this live stream is about. Because I know people are going to be asking me a lot of Queen Mary questions and stuff, and that's perfectly fine, but through the rest of the year, I have tons of live streams about the Queen Mary where you can ask me that stuff. I'm just scrolling back up to see if there's any SS United States questions. Ah, Shiloh is here. Says the landing craft I was thinking of for D-Day was called the Higgins landing craft vessels. And most of them were built in New Orleans. That one I knew. Yeah, that one I knew. But, yeah, Higgins landing craft. That's the name of those things. S11 says, are those Queen Mary dishes in front of you? Yes, these are original Queen Mary bone china. So original china that was used on the Queen Mary prior to its retirement. Sorry, my brain just completely stopped for a second there. But yeah, original china. All from the Queen Mary. Normally, when I do these afternoon tea time streams, I'm usually drinking tea and having biscuits and things, but today is a really warm day. I didn't feel like drinking hot tea. So... who left the light on? Check my previous live streams, my previous afternoon tea time live streams for information about my Queen Mary 2 trip. I talk about it in almost every single live stream. It's just not this one, because this one's about SS United States. Alright, I don't see any more questions for me about SS United States. So... oh, wait, here we go. I scrolled back down to the bottom. Janet says, thank you for giving me the opportunity to vent. I understand the economics of saving the ship. I do get it. But this is sad. After watching YouTube videos of airport stupidity, we need ocean liners. Oh, I agree. I 100%. I mean, I am very biased against airplanes. I'll just say that right now. I'm very biased against airplanes. I don't like the experience of flying. I'm not afraid of flying, But I don't like the experience, and I certainly... Yeah, let's not get into that. Because I think a lot of people who love planes would come at me and be like, you don't understand what you're talking about. Let me just put it this way. I think ships are better. But unfortunately, unfortunately, ships will never dominate the travel industry because airplanes are just faster. But someone, I can't, it's like KKJHG says, will only one funnel of the SS United States be saved? Yes. So just one funnel, not both of them. But the forward funnel, the forward mast, and I believe the forward boom cranes will be saved, as well as the propeller, which will also be on display in front of the museum entrance. And of course, the whole museum entrance will look like the forward superstructure of the SS United States. So it'll look like you're walking on, the forecastle deck of the ship as you're approaching the museum, kinda. And it will extend as far back as one funnel, and then soon after that, the museum terminates. So there won't be anything after that. But I think that's actually pretty good compared to a lot of maritime museums that don't save such huge pieces. I think that's actually a pretty good land-based museum. I think the only thing better than that would be the actual ship itself being saved. But I think for a land-based museum, that's pretty cool. It will look, you'll get to walk the upper decks of the forward superstructure, which is pretty neat. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. Just quickly scrolling. What will happen to the SS United States second funnel then? It'll probably be scrapped. I don't think it'll sync with the ship. Funnels are too unpredictable when you sink a ship on purpose. So they'll probably remove it and scrap it. It is made of, I believe, aluminum. So yeah, they'll probably scrap that. But when you see the SS United States get sunk, most likely what you'll see is the hull and the superstructure, and that's it. Everything on top, masts, funnels, equipment, it'll all be gone. So, even bollards. So the ship has bollards and capstans. I believe those will be saved. Not all of them, but most of them. The bollards, capstans, cleats, those will be taken off the ship and saved for the museum. So you probably won't even see those on the wreck either. Not wreck, but submerged ship. Diamond says, do you think they're removed the engines in the SS United States? Do I think they'll remove the engines before they sink it? I don't know. It would be really cool if they removed at least one engine and kept it for the museum. I don't see them keeping all four. I mean, 4 engines is huge. Absolutely huge. But I do see them keeping one of the engines and then having it kind of displayed in a way where it's taken apart so people can walk around it and see what one of the engines look like, both the inside and the outside. That'd be kind of cool. I hope they do that. And then, of course, there are also power plant devices like the turbo generators that generate electricity for the ship. I hope they save one of those at least so people can see what machine created electricity for the ship. Stuff like that. I hope they save at least one of every major machinery piece. I hope they save at least one boiler. Queen Mary doesn't have any boilers. And, you know, that's why I'm involved with the Yarrow project, to try to change that. I can't say anything more. But, you know, so yeah, it's a very secret operation, believe it or not. But, yeah, so the boilers of the SS United States, I hope they save at least one, because that would be really cool to have in the museum. But at the same time, this museum, it'll be big, but I don't know if it'll be big enough to house all of that, even if it's just one of each. I think it's really... I think we'll be lucky if we see just an engine and not boilers and stuff, just an engine. I think we'd be lucky. I don't think the museum is that big. But then again, I've only seen a drawing of it. They probably have something bigger in mind. Who knows? Yeah, sorry about my gibberish username. It's okay. Oh yes, Rapid Transit. He says the metal, the builder's plaque will be saved. Yes, that definitely will be saved. The builder's plaque, and I believe it may even go on the exterior of the museum. Let's see. Carl asks, can you comment on how it's going to be sunk? I don't really know all the ins and outs of it. I mean, really what I know is that they clean it up so that way it's environmentally safe. You know, there's probably pipes and things that still have a little bit of fuel or a little bit of oil or a little bit of, you know, lubricants and grease in them. So they're probably going to remove that stuff, make sure it's clean, make sure nothing seeps into the environment. They're going to remove all the lead paint, I hope, from the exterior of the ship, so that way lead paint isn't just floating around in the ocean. And then once all that's removed, including the artifacts, stuff from the bridge, I know they're saving the stuff in the bridge, and then the funnel, all that sort of stuff. Once they save all that, the ship will look still a lot like the SS United States, but with a lot of the stuff missing on it. And then when they sink it, usually what they do for sinking a ship on purpose is they'll have hatches where they'll cut holes in certain parts of the hull while it's in dry dock, and then they'll put temporary plugs on those holes. So that way they can float the ship out to where it needs to be, and when they're ready, they'll pull those plugs, and then the water will go into the ship. And they try to sink ships on their side, but in this case, I heard they're trying to sink the SS United States flat on its keel, so it's sitting upright, because in this case, the ship is going to be used for scuba diving, and it's much safer to scuba dive in a ship that is sitting upright, where the, you know, automatically your brain knows how to exit a ship. But when a ship is sitting on its side or it's upside down or something, it'll disorient you, and if you're down there and you need to escape, you might lose your way because the ship is sitting on its side or upside down or something. So in this case, they're going to try very carefully to sink it straight down on its keel, so it's sitting upright in the water, and that way it'll make it easier for scuba divers to get in and out, simply by just, you know, not being disoriented in terms of where doors and exits are. So I think that's interesting, because a lot of times when ships are sunk, they're allowed to sink on their side. So that's pretty interesting, I think. An Age-Old Forgotten says, the museum will be on Destin Beach. Interesting. Okay. Ozzy says, super chat. Oh, right, okay. SS United States will be there on Tuesday, at Mobile, Alabama on Tuesday. Okay. And thank you, Ozzy, for the donation. Okay, so now we know when it'll be there. Rapid Transit says, I feel like there are no engines. No, there are. There are engines still aboard the SS United States. But if you mean no engines that will be saved, you might be right. There's a possibility they won't save any. But I hope they do. I think they will have to remove the engines because they have to clean it. You know, they have to clean, and the engines, well, the engines are steam powered, so I mean, they're not technically, but I mean, there are like lubricant pipes and things that run into the engines, and those things will have to be removed. So you would think that they would remove the engines simply because they're probably full of grease and lubricant that really shouldn't be in the ocean. So I'm thinking they're removing the engines anyway, so they might as well save one of them. But you might be right; they might not do it. You know, there's probably certain allowances, like certain amounts, certain quantities of grease and oil that is allowed to be in a sinking ship. I don't know, but President Francis J. Underwood says, was the exterior of ocean liners designed for looks, or did they actually serve a purpose like the curves and angles on Queen Mary's forward superstructure? And how was the shear built or designed on ships? Yes, the exterior of most ships were designed for looks, but there are certain numbers of ocean liners where it was really more about utility. So there are certain ships where the utility of the way it looked was, you know. So I'm trying to think of one that I don't think is a very pretty ship. Trying to think, it just escapes my memory right now, but it's got to be one of the early 1910s liners, like I don't know. I can't think of one right now. But there are some ships that were their exteriors were really more designed for utility. But then there are ships like Titanic, for instance, which was all about the way it looks. They really took a lot of care about how the exterior of the ship looks. Queen Mary was another one of those where they did think about how the ship looks, but at the same time, there was an equal amount of care taken into the utility of it. You know, so that's why it doesn't have the very clean upper decks the way the Queen Elizabeth does. The upper decks, they were like, you know what? There are certain amounts that the ship needs to look good, but then certain parts, like the upper decks, don't matter. At least that's what they thought. And then, you know, SS Normandy goes into service, and it's one of the cleanest, most beautiful exteriors of a ship you can find. And then Cunard was like, okay, well, we can't just replicate Queen Mary now. We need our next ship, the Queen Elizabeth, to look very clean on the outside. So then they actually went through the effort to make sure Queen Elizabeth looked very clean on the exterior, a lot more like Normandy. So yeah, it really is a balance. It really depends on the ship and what it's being used for. Flagships get the most attention. So Queen Mary, Queen Elizabeth, SS in the United States, you know, SS Normandy, Titanic, flagships, they get the majority of the attention. But smaller ships, they're allowed to look a little bit uglier because they're not the flagship. So, yeah. But like, for instance, the curves on the front of Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth, those are meant to be like aerodynamic, but they also are designed to look stepped back, so that way the front of the ship kind of looks like a wedding cake, you know. Certain things were designed for looks, but then also served a secondary purpose for utility, like aerodynamics and stuff like that. Mm. Edward Solonik says, it would be impossible to remove any of the power plants in the SS United States intact. They would have to chop a giant hole in the hull. I believe it won't happen. I hear they will leave access holes for divers to get in. Okay, so they don't have to cut a hole in the side of the hull of the ship to remove that. They could do like what they did with the Queen Mary, where the funnels have direct access to the boiler rooms, right? And when you clear out the boiler rooms, if you need to get to the power plant, which, like the Queen Mary, is not directly accessed from above, they could just cut a hole in the watertight compartment to reach it. And that's what they did for Queen Mary. They cut holes in the watertight bulkheads so that way they could reach the power plant and remove the turbo generators and then move them into the boiler rooms and then haul them up the funnels. And so that's what they did with Queen Mary, and they can do the same thing for SS United States. So if they want to save a turbo generator from SS United States, they could just, once they remove the boilers, cut a hole into the bulkhead that separates the power plant and then just remove the turbo generator up through the funnel. So they could do it. I can see it happening. It suddenly got cloudy outside. It started off as a really warm, sunny day. Aqua says, will the funnel in the museum be restored or left in its current state? It will be restored. So the funnel will go on the exterior of the museum, so you'll see it from outside. But yes, it'll be restored. I think it would have to be because, the city that it'll be in, they don't want to see, a rotting museum. They want to see something that looks clean and nice and beautiful. So I think it'll be restored. RMS Titanic says, at least she won't be sunk until 2026. No, I heard she'll be sunk this September or sometime this fall. I don't think it'll be 2026. Because they need... The museum will open in 2026. But the ship will be sunk this fall. So... Alex says, how will they prevent the ship from deteriorating over time like Titanic? Or is it sort of inevitable? It's inevitable. It's not going to be there forever. But there's no reason to believe it can't be there for the next 100 years. So, you'll probably be long gone from this Earth before the SS United States becomes a stain on the bottom of the ocean. So, but it's inevitable, yeah. Okaloosa County area in Florida. Yeah. Destin Beach. Nova says, will they add the SS United States preserved things at Mobile, Alabama Museum? I don't think so. I think it's all going to the SS United States Conservancy Museum in Destin Beach. So I don't think it's... Yeah. I'm trying to get... There's a lot of questions. My goodness. Yeah, 6 months to a year. I believe that. Just reading. Oh, thank you so much, Jesper. Jesper says, do you think this would have been the fate of Olympic and Mauritania if they weren't scrapped? Or would they turn them into museum ships like SS Nomadic? There was once an attempt to restore the Olympic and turn it into a hotel, but back then there just wasn't that much interest from the public to see a museum ocean liner, because at the time ocean liners, this was the 1930s, ocean liners were a dime a dozen. If one disappeared, newer, better ones were coming, online. So people really didn't think of ocean liners as these nostalgic things back then. they were still around, just newer. But now today we don't really have them except for the Queen Mary 2. So every time we have an ocean liner that is around, we want to preserve it because there might not be another. So it's a very different mindset. So I think Olympic and Mauritania were destined to be scrapped, honestly. I don't think there would have been much interest in saving them. But yeah, thank you so much for the donation. Trying to get through these. Okay, I've reached the bottom. Here we go. Where's the museum going to be? Someone says Destin Beach area. So this is from an Age Forgotten. She says museum is going to be in Destin Beach area in Okaloosa County, Florida. So yeah, that's where the museum will be, and it should be along the beach somewhere. And I mean, not right on the water, but it'll be somewhere in the coastal area of that city. So yeah. Anyway, folks, I think we've been on for 2 hours. I'm gonna call that the end of the live stream. I just wanted to kind of clear up some things about the SS United States, and and if my conversation today has changed your mind about the way you think of things, about the Conservancy, about the SS United States being saved, and about the Queen Mary, then I do encourage you to try to change the minds of others, because there's a lot of people right now who are so upset about what's happening to the SS United States that they're throwing their hate at the Queen Mary. I think all ocean liners currently in existence should be saved, because they're the last of the last. I don't want to see the SS United States sunk, but I also don't see any other choice for it at the time being. I think the only thing that could possibly save her, and I don't even think that it's going to happen, is Trump himself saving the SS United States. I think that's really the only thing that's going to save the ship. But like I said, I don't even think that's going to happen. So I think really the SS United States it's unfortunately going to meet its end. But that being said, that shouldn't be any reason for people to hold animosity towards the Queen Mary, because it wasn't America that saved the Queen Mary. It was one city. It was the city of Long Beach, and they probably would have saved the SS United States if SS United States had gone up for auction before the Queen Mary. But it didn't. It was just an unfortunate set of events that led to this. And I don't think there's any one person you can blame. I think it's just a series of unfortunate events, honestly. So, thank you guys so much for joining me. I love you all. I hope all of you are able to come to terms with what's happening to the SS United States, and we can at least enjoy the last sights of her. And remember, the museum that will go in Destin Beach, it's going to be really cool. It's going to be huge, and it's going to look like the SS United States, at least from the upper decks area, and it'll be unlike any other ship museum that we've ever seen. It'll be really cool, and hopefully they'll save some things like the engines to put in the museum. So anyway, folks, thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time. Bye.